Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode of the Digital Adoption Show, where we host top L&D, HR, and tech luminaries and talk about what's next in the future of work and tech. I'm your host, Antara Dutta, Customer Success Manager at WhatFix, and today we are going to discuss how imperative a product mindset is in learning and development. Since today's discussion revolves around adopting a product mindset while designing learning experiences, it made sense to have someone who embraces this new approach in creating learning solutions. Today, we are joined by Greg, the founder of Two Circles Design Studio, who is transforming learning and development with a unique product design mindset. With a career spanning BP, HSBC, and industries from oil and gas to pharmaceuticals, Greg rejects off-the-shelf solutions in favor of custom, impactful learning experience. His approach blends innovation with a deep understanding of both people and business needs, making learning not just effective but transformative. Greg is incredibly passionate about pushing boundaries and creating learning programs that resonate and deliver real value. Before we start our discussion, Greg, why don't you tell our audience a bit about yourself, your experience, and your role at Two Circle Studio? What led you to start your own company?
Oh, so running my own agency was something I've been thinking about for maybe 3 or 4 years before I actually did it. So I'd been aware of some really good, and I'd worked with some really, really good agencies and some that were maybe not so good. I don't want to say bad, but maybe not so good. So I was kind of aware what good looked like in the market. And I wanted to create something that was better than good, that focused on, or at least lent on product design for learning, capability, culture, leadership, those kind of things, but not focused on things like tired or dated learning design models. I wanted to basically target the challenges I've seen people use agencies for, because ultimately we're here to fix problems, build capability, and make a difference, not just to deliver something. So any good product has a purpose. It's not a commodity for no reason. But I wanted to make sure that visual design and experience, so basically the core of UI and UX was not an add-on, but something that was in the mix from the beginning. And all of this makes up Two Circles. And we're one tomorrow. We've got our first year anniversary tomorrow from when we recorded this. So far, I've kind of seen pretty impressed with what we've done. So in our first year, super happy, but there's loads more we could do. And I think, like I say, all of those things together is basically how product design, learning design, and everything I've done in my career has basically come to this last 12 months.
That's amazing. I think you're going to get a very unique perspective today with us. So, we have a quick rapid fire round for you with three quirky questions, which we proudly call as the triple strike. So, are you ready to be triple struck, Greg?
Let's do it.
So, what's the one totally useless skill you've learned or would learn just for fun?
So I've not learned it yet, but I'm going to. I'd love to learn to juggle. So not just like a party trick where you juggle like 3 apples or something, but like 5 or more things of all sizes. And if any of those things are on fire, even better. And very envious of people that can do that. That just kind of even this, like, I know that's wrong, but like, I want to be able to juggle. So yeah, no reason for it. It's all pointless, but I'd love
That's
to.
wild. If you were stuck on an island, what is that one thing you'll definitely want to have?
I should probably say my phone so I can call for help, but I'm under the assumption that there's no phone signal and help will just turn up as and when. So I would say probably a hammock, something I don't sleep very well. So something I can sleep on, something I can have a little think. I've got all of that time. I'm going to be thinking and I'm going to be pondering stuff. So somewhere comfortable, away from the bugs, and then I can have a little snooze when I'm ready as well. So yeah, nice little hammock.
Amazing. If extraterrestrial beings suddenly landed on Earth, what's the first question you'll ask them that would completely baffle them?
What sound does color make? I'd love to know what red sounds like. I don't know. I
Very,
don't know what to say. So yeah.
very nice, Greg. Those were some really fun answers, and I'm really amazed by your thoughts. So let's now move on to the real bit of our podcast, the serious bit, if I may say. So, are you good to go?
Good. All good.
All right. So, to start, can you walk us through your product design process specifically for learning? And how does this differ from traditional L&D approaches? And how do you guide people through it?
Sure. So I've got a process called the Experience Design Logbook, which is basically 6 stages. That is a mishmash of, or kind of a combination of a lot of existing methodologies. It's kind of half existing methodologies that are put together and half my own kind of learnings, assumptions, and experiences all put together. So there's a maybe 20-minute video on my website that kind of walks you through step by step. But basically, it's things that I've gotten wrong in the past, realizations I've had. I ran a recent client workshop where I was explaining to them the process and talking them through how to use it. And I could see people doing things that I used to do. They were kind of trying to jump ahead or they're trying to think about things. So with product design, and I mentioned earlier, like a good product has to have a process. It has to have a process and a reason to exist and a reason that the individual wants it and needs it and how they know it's working for them. So a lot of the kind of first half of the process, it does feel, and I've had this feedback from people, it does feel a lot like you're asking too many questions, you're spending too much time talking, you're spending too much time analyzing data. The response is always the same, which is too much time against what? Like what? How long is a piece of string kind of thing? And they want to get to the fun stuff and they want to start designing and doing things. So if you get the first half right, and whilst it might feel like you're spending a lot of time talking and analyzing and gathering data and not just coming up with assumptions, but coming up with real hard facts, you will absolutely speed through the second half of the process. And that's where you start to look at things like design and marketing and measurement and all the things that we talk about in learning, but we don't often get it right because we haven't done the first half right. So it's trying to just shift mindset rather than tell people that they're doing things wrong.
That's a very interesting approach. And like you mentioned that, it involves a shift of mindset, right? So how did the transition of, shift in mindset impact your approach to designing L&D products?
So learning design isn't really bound by one singular set of rules. Like there's a lot of different methodologies kicking around, but I do feel like a lot of them are quite rigid, as in you have to follow these rules. So my process has flex in it, and then you can bend the rules to a degree because it depends on what's happening. We're dealing with real people, real life problems, real life businesses. So whilst there are certain moments where the individual might say that's right and wrong, the process as a whole is more saying, can you justify why it's right? And there are subtle differences when you think about learning design to product design, and also how the two can kind of go together and work really well together. So mainly how you kind of phrase questions and the follow-ups you have. So on the surface, again, people probably feel like they could look through my process and say, well, I'm doing that already. But then when you start working with people and saying, we're going to spend a bit more time here, or we're going to, talking about stakeholders is a good one, where a lot of people say, these are my stakeholders for these reasons. Fine. But then if you then start to think about from a product mindset, it's then a case of, well, why are they here? What value are they adding? And if we got rid of this person, or we kind of bump them down the list of priorities, what's going to happen? Is that a bad thing? Are they dead weight? Are they really useful in this project, but not on this project? So it's rather than just taking it for granted that this person's in a particular role, so therefore they must be a good stakeholder. It's like, well, and that can be different on project to project. So the most important group of people in any product design project is not anyone on the project team. It's not your stakeholders. It's not the people paying your bills. It's the people you're making the products on the project for. Those are the most important people. And you should only ever be thinking about them. So yeah, there's a lot of mindset shift around. I feel like I'm doing it, but when you actually start to do it and you really trust the process and follow the process, you realize that there are some really subtle and some really massive changes to make. And like I said, working with a few clients over the last few months around just shifting their mindset just slightly to the left or slightly to the right is that has made huge differences for them. And they're kind of moving quicker. They're making more, more specific decisions and they know it's going to work rather than just making things for the sake of making things.
That's amazing. And I can see how much thought goes into this whole process of joining the two. So, one interesting thing that I read is that your company focuses on avoiding off the shelf solutions. Can you share an example where a custom approach significantly outperformed a traditional one? And what were the key factors that made the difference?
So this product is all under NDA, so I can't mention the company name, but I can pretty sure I can tell you enough about the project. So there was a company going through internal and external change. As in it's so much was changing about just the way they existed as a company in the marketplace, but also for the people that works there as well. We were tasked with creating a change product that would go to sort of tens of thousands of people. And what we wanted to do was we also worked with a couple of other people from their company that were dealing with more specific groups, so more kind of higher management level people. But ultimately, again, we're still dealing with people. So it doesn't really matter too much if it's senior leadership, first level leadership, people that are non-managers, whilst there are slight differences, again, still dealing with people. They still have emotions, they still have feelings, they're still going to have reactions to whatever it is you show them and what they do. So what we wanted to do was think about how do we take people on a journey? How can we make this personalized to 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people? So that was a huge ask. So then we kind of went back to basics and looked at existing products that are in the consumer marketplace. The things like an iPhone. We all buy the same iPhone. Like when it comes out the box, it's the same for everybody. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, it looks the same. The instructions are the same. The box is the same. It's exactly the same. As soon as you turn it on, actually, when you turn it on, it's still the same. As soon as you start to change things on that phone, so you put your pictures on there, you change the home screen, you put different apps on there, you say what time your alarm should be, how all your shortcuts work, and just how you use it day to day. Within probably less than a minute, it's yours. It's not the same as somebody else's. And after a month, it's entirely yours. It's absolutely nothing like it else's. So whilst there are some things that are the same, how you get to your settings is the same. How you maybe take a photo or turn it on and off. Those kind of things are consistent. It's still yours. It's still personal to you. So going back to our product, so what we were trying to do was the team we were kind of partnered with were working on a different group of people. They decided to go for a more standard cohort classroom driven approach, which is not bad. It's not a bad way of working. Just in this particular scenario, it didn't work for us. So they were focusing on creating classroom content. Then it had to be translated. They had to think about training trainers. They could only run through, I think, 10 or 12 people at a time. And this was audience of hundreds and nearly thousands for them as well. We were trying to think of a digital solution that we could deploy to upwards of 50,000 people all at once, where they could all just grab it and, similar to the iPhone, make it personal straight away, but still have that consistency going through it so that each of them could be into the community. So the classroom group started to look at more traditional topics where it's kind of the trainer says something for a while, the group do a few things, they do in the classroom. After a couple of days, they all go back to their jobs and that's it. So what we were doing was we partnered with a company in San Francisco called Inwoven, who were lovely, really great people. And we created a product called Exploring Change. So what this does is you would have intact teams. They would join their own private working space. So every team had their own space. And you could do this in groups of kind of 3 to 10 people. You could do it instantly. They would all have the same instructions to say, you're going to walk through these stages in order. Each stage would give you like an overview. It would then give you something to do as a group, but in real life. So you wouldn't just do it. You wouldn't take time out of your job. You would do it alongside your job. So it might be things like how you speak to each other, how you plan your day out, how you support each other, how you reflect on challenges, how you maybe shift your dynamic in your team. Again, some specifics that I can't say because it's NDA. But then you document it. So the third bit in every stage of you would document it. So you'd almost have like a diary. So you'd have a group diary and a personal diary. So you'd be able to fill this in the same way you would with social media. So you could use photos, you could use voice notes, you could use videos or text, or you could write a poem, or it's up to you, however you feel best to express yourself. The point of it was, and a bit like when you're going through any kind of change. So we need some things like fitness apps as an example. It's not something that happens overnight. You would take many photos at the start and the end. You would track measurements at the start and the end, or if you're trying to run faster or lift heavier, you would track your speed or your weight then and what you're doing. So the point of them documenting these things over the time was that they would see where they were at the beginning and they would see where they were at the end. When you're living with yourself every day, we don't notice those changes very much. There's little changes that happen here and there, but some of those little changes are really big. And unless something really big happens, don't really realize it. Um, and what we wanted to also implement was making sure that, say you and I were in a group, there might be portions of that process that we go through where you're absolutely fine. You're kind of going through again, this bit doesn't really matter to me. But for me, I'm thinking, oh, I'm really struggling. I don't know what to do, and I'm not really sure. I feel a bit nervous about this. You might help me. But then it might be the next stage where it's the opposite way around. So it's trying to incorporate that kind of peer to peer, that kind of social connection of basically saying it's okay if you can do some bits and not other bits. Like that's absolutely normal. We're not here to make this mandated, or it's not a one size fits all. It's something where take it individually. You put it in the context of your role. You put it in the context of what's happening around you and how you deal with something, not how we're telling you to deal with something. So we're kind of like guiding people to their own answer rather than guiding them to one singular answer. And we got some really great feedback. We got some really great NPS scores from this. The classroom course was fine. It didn't kind of score as well. It didn't really kind of go as well. But the reason for that for us was that we felt like we really focused in on what was happening for individuals, um, and how we can affect people on a personal level at such a big scale. So I appreciate it's a very long explanation of it, but that was the no, we were really proud of that product.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really mind blowing. Just hearing about the solution makes me want to utilize it. I mean, I'm just thinking about the level of effectiveness it would increase for the whole training process altogether. Thank you for sharing that.
And you know, the-
So, talking about your portfolio a bit, so we saw that your portfolio spans industries from oil and gas to fashion. So, how do you adapt your learning design process to meet the unique demands of these varied sectors? And what common threads do you find in creating successful learning experience?
It's a great question. So I would say my my usual answer, probably up until about a year ago, would have been it's the same wherever we go. As in, it's still people, they're still adults. So we're not dealing with formal educational learning. But maybe about kind of 8 months ago, sorry, we started working with British Airways. So whilst a lot of the companies I worked with before were very regulated, British Airways are so much more regulated than I could ever realize. So as an airline, there are lots of things around safety, around even just things like logistics, around getting planes moving on time, that kind of stuff. Lots of things I hadn't really taken into consideration. So my standard answer is probably still to a degree, we're dealing with people. We're helping people overcome challenges. We're helping people build capability, build a culture, change a behavior. Those kind of things are still the same. But the thing that can be different, and the thing where that kind of takes us a big turn, is that when you get into an environment that's heavily, heavily regulated, there are some things that are out of your control. Even if somebody says, I don't really have to understand that regulation because it doesn't really affect me, that's a different part of the business. Probably then have to start thinking about degrees of separation. So it's not directly affecting you, but what about the person near you? What about the project you might be on? What about the business as a whole? So if the business as a whole starts failing because of something way over there, how does that affect you way over there? And that was something that was a real challenge. So there was lots of things around people saying, this is the way we've always done it. or this really works for our team, or all the usual things people say, like, oh, our bosses really love this, or our stakeholders really love this. But then when you come down to, again, this is any industry, when you really come down to it, people are still people. There is still a social aspect to what they're doing. So when you look at things like social media, or the type of entertainment that's available, or the products that are available in your everyday life, things where it's more autonomous things. So I have a little robot vacuum going off downstairs at the moment. So saves me doing it. There's now AI, so you don't have to think as much. You can get input from those guys, those those machine learning models even. But like, again, it all comes back to helping out a real life person. How is this affecting their day? So when we bring this all back to learning and product design, we still need to think about, why did you call an agency? Or why did you think that you needed to solve a learning problem? What is that learning problem? So if you remove all of this nonsense to one side about technology, social aspects, and the rest of it, you just have to really, really focus on, what is the problem? What is the problem? How do you know it's a problem? And then what does not having that problem look like? So both sort of, so if real life magic was a thing, like a second, when magic wand, the problem goes away, what does that look like? Does that, does that then say this problem's gone, but this one's came up, or is everything fine? So then you almost have an as is and to be state. So my as is state is what's happening. My to be state is what I'd like to happen. Then you have your middle ground. And again, keep saying it, but it comes back to people doing things differently. And that's either because they've learned a skill, changed the behavior, built a culture. But even something as simple as don't push the red button, push the blue button. Right. Just put a sticker between the two buttons that says, don't push this one, push it. Super easy. If it's anything more complex than that, you're going to need to spend time with your audience. You're going to need to think about, what is going on? Why is it happening? Is it a comfort thing? Is it a social thing? Is it they don't know? So, don't beat them up over things that they don't know about. It's not their fault. Yeah. So largely it's the same, but then you have to take into consideration things like I say, regulations and complex words, like complex kind of business protocol, probably the simplest way of explaining it. So things like laws, regulations, company history, those kind of things, where it might seem very obvious we're going to go and do this thing, but then there's 400 things in a way to stop you doing that thing. So yeah, again, people helping people. That's what it is.
Definitely. And I love your focus on the problem statement, which is the major thing you hope to solve. Lovely. So, effective learning experiences are built on the understanding of the learner's needs, which you very much focus on. So,
Mm.
how do you balance this with the needs of the business? Can you walk us through your process for aligning these, sometimes competing interests?
Sure, sure. So again, I think for this one is, to your last point, your last question, sorry, it's still people helping people, but in this instance, we need to think about it as more of a commercial area. So we need to think about the fact that the business can't exist without its customers, and probably and definitely the staff that work in that business. And the staff don't have jobs without the business, and the business doesn't have business without the customers. It's kind of a little virtuous circle of everyone needing each other for a reason. So when we're creating learning products, we need to think about all of those three groups. So it's making sure that it works for everyone. And so we refer to them in our company as trade-offs. So it might be, so a trade-off I have in my personal life is chocolate. That's probably it's the simple example. I I would eat chocolate all day, every day, and nothing else. I absolutely love it. But if I did do that, I'd, I'd be really sick. I couldn't, it's in a couple of years, really bad outcomes about to come out with it. So I'm not going to do that. So my trade-off is that I eat vegetables and try and exercise. So when we think about this in a, uh, in a business and learning and consumer focus, is making sure that what are the business needs, what are the learner needs, what are the customer needs, and then if you have the big long list of needs, then you also have a list of wants as well. So whilst I want lots of chocolate, I can't because I need to stay alive. So the business needs these things. These are almost your non-negotiables. And the things you want are, if we can add them in, can we justify it? And then if you're having all of these different wants and needs, you then need to start to think about, if a business has this particular need, how does that affect the needs of the customer and the needs of the learning thing, the needs of the staff? And if you can't find common ground, then you have a problem. So very rarely have we found any needs from those audiences where we can't find a workaround or a need or a reason to include them. So whilst it might not always seem obvious, so talking about company profits. So, big Starbucks is a big company. It's always in the news for company profits, Amazon, those kind of things. Yeah. And companies are there to make profit, right? So if they're not making profits, they can't pay the staff. If the customers aren't buying their coffee, then they're not going to be able to pay the staff. Their business won't exist and so on. So yeah, it's basically trying to make sure that we understand why something is happening. And again, this comes back to saying at the start, actually, about removing stakeholders that don't really need to be there, and also removing anyone, whether it's design team, stakeholders, influencers, whoever it is, because no one has an opinion that's greater than the customer in this instance, or the end user of your learning product. So if someone is saying the business needs this, and I would like it delivered in this particular way, or I need it to be this particular solution, no, is the answer usually. Or if it is a yes, then yes, but give them some reason behind that. Give me some factual data or some facts or data or something that convinces me that this is going to work for the end audience. So why do you want it that way? If it's cheaper, is that a business need? You can't afford it. Is it that you would like it to be cheaper? That's your want. Um, is it going to work? If both are going to work, then let's talk about it. And we look at varying degrees of, I'm not trying to knock people's ideas out, but what we're trying to say is it has to work for everyone. So I'm probably going off on a tangent way too much here, but it's basically trying to make sure that you kind of drag everything back to, that's a great idea, but how does it affect the end solution? So you never start a project with, we're going to make this type of solution. Let's try and fit the data into that. Your solution comes way, way down the line, probably a lot later than most people would be comfortable with. But once you know what you're going to make and why you're going to make it, it's because you've done all this stuff up front, your wants and needs list. So it makes very much sense.
Amazing. Thank you again for sharing such a interesting approach. While I was talking to you previously, I think you mentioned your frustration with dead end learning. Uh, so, what do you think are some common signs that an L&D program is heading in that direction, and how can organizations avoid it?
I think there is a lot of trying to reset. There's a couple of things. So first one is probably just resetting how they approach learning. So again, working with some clients in the last kind of 12 months has been, we asked them, how does your work come in? So we work with clients and they bring problems to us. But if you're an internal learning team, how do you find out about problems? Is it that it's set at board level where they say we need to have kind of things? What we're then thinking about there is how much of it is behavior change, how much of it is skill, how much of it is capability, how much of it is memory. So if you're doing like a standard e-learning where it's a case of we've told you all this information for the last 10 minutes and here's a quiz, all you're really testing is memory. You're not testing anyone that can do something. So again, breaking those things out, trying to think about why you're doing that. Again, the main thing that we try and prevent people is focus on the problem. Don't even start to think about solutions. So if you're really comfortable making a particular type of solution, or you're really excited about ChatGPT and AI and all these other things that are happening, all of that is great. Right now, that's not what we're talking about. All we're talking about is, what is the problem? How does it present itself in real life? What's the reason for that? Where has it come from? Why has it come from there? What's the worst thing that will happen if we don't do anything with this? And what's the worst thing that will happen? Or what's the best thing, sorry, that will happen if we do something with this? And then you kind of start to have this kind of pros and cons list and your wants and needs list. So I think it's people just trying to focus on the problem way more than they currently do, rather than taking the problem at face value. Yeah, the solution will fall out naturally. It's not a quest you have to go on. It's, if you do your homework, it will naturally go, and here's the right solution. It can be pretty straightforward.
I agree with you completely. Thank you so much, Greg. This discussion has been truly enriching. And I mean, who knew so much could unfold in learning and development landscape once you shift towards a product design mindset? So
Yeah.
truly a game changer discussion. And thank you so much for joining the podcast today. To our listeners, stay tuned for more content like this featuring incredible thought leaders like Greg. We are available on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Whether you're at home or on the go, the podcast is your getaway to learn about the latest trends in L&D, HR, and tech. I'm your host, Antara, signing off for today. Thank you.